Welcome back to our masterclass in writing a novel, your novel. And we have been focused on chapter 1 examples in the last 5 sessions. And now we're going to move on to chapter 2. We covered this book's chapter 1 example in masterclass 1. And so we're going to do a quick summary of that chapter and then move straight on to its second chapter. The chapter opened with the protagonist, Mr. Moore, who regained consciousness in a strange, dark and claustrophobic environment. Disoriented and physically impaired, he struggles to make sense of his surroundings, a surreal cave-like place with black wrinkled walls and a hissing kerosene lamp. The prose mirrors his confusion and panic, immersing the reader in his unsettling experience. As he slowly gathers his strength, he discovers he's wearing a wetsuit and trapped in a bizarre volcanic tunnel. Part of the path is blocked by a rock fall, and the other leads to a pool of dark water that appears to connect to the sea. In this pool, he finds a buoy attached to a small white chest containing water, food, drinks, scuba weights, and a sealed letter addressed to him. The letter reveals grim information. The exit is a 200-yard underwater passage, and this place was intentionally designed as a type of oubliette, a prison meant to be forgotten. There are no gates or bars, just isolation and the near impossibility of escape. This chapter builds strong tension and mystery, leaving the reader with questions about who put Moore here and whether escape is actually possible. When chapter 2 follows a prologue such as this, set in the future, it often functions as the true narrative beginning of your story. The first step in the journey that eventually leads to the dramatic scene hinted at in the prologue. To make this effective, chapter 2 should establish several foundational elements. It should show the main character in their ordinary life before the story's central conflict unfolds, give the reader a sense of who they are before the change, establish their strengths, flaws, and maybe a hint of their deeper yearning and inner conflict. While external events may be calm, show the protagonist's emotional or moral unease. Something's not right, even if they don't know what that is yet. Contrast with the tone of the prologue, so calm versus chaos, order versus disruption. Chapter 2 should feel like it belongs to the same book as far as voice and theme. Root the reader in when and where the story is now taking place, especially if it's temporally or geographically different from the prologue. While the actual inciting incident of the prologue may come later, chapter 2 often introduces the conditions or choices that make the inciting incident inevitable. You could introduce key figures in the protagonist's life, friends, mentors, love interests, rivals. These characters help define the protagonist through interaction. Begin to hint at tensions that will unravel. A job under stress, a secret being kept, surveillance, new visitor. Begin to hint at tensions or systems that will unravel. There may be subtle foreshadowing here that ties into the events teased at in the prologue. Chapter 2 is a good place to begin seeding key rules, technologies, ideologies, but lightly, avoiding any info dumps. Reassure the reader that the gap between this chapter and the prologue will be bridged. This can be done through dramatic irony, a symbol, a mysterious event, a recurring image, or through the central character that the reader now recognizes from the prologue. So let's break chapter 2, our example here, into 3 parts and switch on to read through this as a writer. 1 month earlier, James allowed his thoughts to wander as he drove the same familiar commute. It was a dangerous practice since he would often arrive with only a vague recollection of leaving home and then arriving at work. Traffic was neither slow nor fast, and maybe it was this unchanging consistency that caused his mind to drift. It was in these days he became conscious of the surrounding terrain and all at once had this strange sense of being out of his natural element. Although he had lived in San Diego for 10 years, he was originally from southern England, and Southern California is quite different. This quandary would always plague him, warping his mind back and forward about some equidistant point in the Atlantic. California was like an affluent foster parent that had given him success and a lifestyle beyond compare. And so any criticism always left him feeling a little ungrateful. In contrast, England was like a maternal parent that had nurtured him from birth and through the formative years of his youth, creating a strong bond. But its limited opportunity had ultimately driven him away. He was dragged out of this daydream when he realized, once again, he was pulling into the campus parking lot. After maneuvering carefully into a space, he parked, scooped up an armful of books, folders, and his briefcase, locked the car, and strode determinedly towards the university's main entrance. James Moore was a 34-year-old professor whose discipline of expertise was electronic engineering. Being around 6 foot tall, blonde, and athletically built, he could easily have passed for a California native. As he approached the security guard's hut, a tall, pear-shaped man in uniform glanced up and immediately rose from his chair. Putting down his magazine, he opened the half door and ambled towards James, grinning jovially. "Morning, Professor Moore. Did you have a good weekend?" He chuckled as he spoke, even though nothing humorous had been said. "Good morning, Lou. Yes, I did, thanks. How are things with you?" "Not so bad. I'm enjoying your class. You don't mind if I sit in now and again?" "Not at all. You know you're always welcome." Having an innate fascination for technology, Lou attended James's lectures whenever he had the time. With slight hesitation, he asked, "You mentioned the other day you have a new textbook out." "Yes, in fact, I have a copy for you here." James juggled the pile of books in his arms and slipped out a volume. This offering triggered several more embarrassed laughs interspersed with numerous appreciative gestures. "Well, well, look at this. This is very good of you. Thank you very much, Professor Moore." James had on several occasions insisted Lou call him by his first name, but this request caused much discomfiture and had never been adopted. Lou was in his early 60s, and his perpetual good humor gave his rugged, tanned face a boyish quality that instantly warmed one to him. His thick, neatly cut grey hair sprang back from his forehead in a deep wave, and James had only ever seen him dressed in his dark blue uniform that had most definitely seen better days. "Well, I hope you enjoy it. Better be off or I'll be late. See you later." With a parting wave, James hurried off, leaving Lou deeply engrossed in the contents of the book. This is a solid, thoughtful opening that works well as a tonal and pace reset from the surreal intensity and mystery of Chapter 1's prologue. It establishes the protagonist's world and personality, introduces a likable side character in Lou, and starts building a sense of normalcy that readers instinctively know will soon be disrupted. The 1 month earlier cue effectively orients the reader and establishes that this chapter is a return to more normal, earlier time. It's a common but effective narrative device to contrast with the chaos of Chapter 1. James Moore is introduced with subtle complexity. The introspection during his commute gives insight into his background, identity conflict, England versus California, and a touch of vulnerability. His interaction with Lou humanizes him further. James is not just an academic, but someone with empathy, respect for others, and a generous spirit. The pacing here is intentionally calm and reflective, contrasting effectively with the suspense and urgency of the previous chapter. The tone is contemplative and grounded, which can serve to build reader investment in James as a character before the tension builds again. So let's look at the next part of Chapter 2. Packed full of meandering students, James weaved his way through the corridor towards his office. Entering through a door marked Computer Electronic Engineering Department, there is a relaxed but efficient activity and murmur from several of the department's administration personnel, busy at computers, talking to one another, and in a few distant offices, students talk with counselors. James's colleague and friend Paul Barnes waved to him. "Hurry, James, he's here. I put him in your office." James dumped his books on a nearby desk, brushed down his jacket with his hands, and ran his fingers through his hair. "Oh, really? What's he like?" That bad, eh? It's probably just me." Paul had been teaching at the university for 15 years. 10 years older than James, he was a man of average height and build with untidy sandy hair. He had a slightly unkempt appearance and a calm and pleasant demeanor that belied his quick wit and shrewd mind. He had been happily married to Cheryl for 12 years, and they had a 10-year-old son called Scott. What didn't you like about him? Now remember, this publicity could help us secure more funding, so show restraint. Raising an eyebrow questioningly, James followed Paul into the room. A tall, heavy-set man with his back to them stood with his legs astride, studying a wall chart. His hands were thrust deep into his pockets, and he rocked gently on the balls of his feet. At the sound of them entering, he spun round, and James could tell immediately why Paul's first impression of the man was not complimentary. From his well-groomed head to his polished loafers, he exuded self-importance and unwarranted arrogance. He glanced at them with something resembling a sneer. Paul made the introductions with enthusiasm. "James, this is Peter Menzig of Science Monthly. Mr. Menzig, James Moore." James extended his hand. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Menzig. Won't you take a seat?" With a weak handshake, phony smile, and minimal enthusiasm, he drawled, "I'll be asking you a few questions, and then I'm going to need a few shots of the lab." "Great," said Paul, with unnecessary exuberance. Placing a tape recorder on the desk, Menzig took out a pad and pen, and with a patient tone, "Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you both to use plain, simple English for my readers. And let's keep this brief, shall we? I only have a limited time I can give you." Knowing full well that if he replied, he would more than likely say the wrong thing, James simply nodded. Driving a car is easy for us, but difficult for computers. the processing speed of silicon chips increases incrementally, but we're a long way off. In contrast, the human retina and the neurons it's linked to can process images about 1,000,000 times faster than our fastest present-day computers. So, to get smarter systems, a new breed of computer is needed that combines living neurons and silicon circuits. Fantasy, Menzik exclaimed. Reality. I have a short video I'd like to show you. So this section of Chapter 2 contains good tension, character dynamics, and subtle exposition. The interaction between James and Paul is warm, believable, showing a relaxed collegial relationship. Paul's cautious warning and the introduction of Menzik adds a touch of comic tension and sets up the dynamic nicely. The disdain James feels toward Menzik is well conveyed, particularly in the physical description and the contrast between appearance and behavior. The explanation of the technology is compact and relatively well integrated into the conversation, avoiding a dry info dump. The pacing is steady and moves the plot forward from everyday work into a pivotal moment, an interview that may influence funding and public perception. So let's now look at the last part of Chapter 2. James turned the screen of his desktop to face Menzik, and the video began with title and credits, and then cut to a bleach white lab where he could see several technicians working in clean room coveralls from head to toe. The camera then moved to a viewing eyepiece, and a new angle showed a microscopic view of brain cells in a jelly-like nucleus with a spider-like metallic clamp being moved slowly into the frame. James continued, "This may sound like science fiction, but it's science fact. 4 years ago, we connected a lobster's brain cell to an electronic circuit made with about $10 of widely available off-the-shelf components. And we were able to get this living circuit or biocircuit to function smoothly as a single unit. We now have the neurons from a leech connected to a PC and are able to have it perform simple math problems." The video now showed the spider-like metallic clamp locking gently onto the jelly nucleus. The next scene pulled back to show the dynamic clamp connected through a wire to a microchip. Then pulled back further to show a microchip in a signal processor circuit, and then pulled back further again to show this circuit in a computer system. Menzik showed signs of reluctant interest, but how do they work things out? The architecturally rigid PCs of today need programmers to define every possible eventuality. Neurocomputers will act more like neurons, breaking and building new connections until they find solutions to complicated problems using their own unique, extremely high-speed, non-linear thinking method. But you can't connect organic and inorganic systems. You couldn't until we developed a dynamic clamp. It allows us to intercept signals from one neuron and inject them into another. Are the signals compatible? A signal processor converts the analog brain waves used by neurons to the digital zeros and ones of computers. Menzik had stopped taking notes and sat in silence. For a moment, it looked as though he was about to let down his haughty facade and show genuine interest. So he stopped abruptly. "I'm afraid I'm out of time." This was declared without looking at his watch. "So we'll have to continue at another time." "You haven't seen the lab." "It is really something to see this in action," Paul added. I'll send my assistant over when I can spare her to wrap this up. Disappointed at the premature termination, James leaned back and fixed Menzies with a cold stare. Sensing the mounting tension, Paul leapt to his feet, eager to usher Menzies out of the room. Before they could leave, James called out, "By the way, Mr. Menzies, have you ever seen the brain cell of a swamp-loving, blood-sucking parasite?" Menzies paused, puzzled, his bulk framed in the doorway. "A leech?" "No, a reporter. It's quite small, you know." With a burst of embarrassed laughter, Paul ushered him away, saying, "These English, such a sense of humor, don't you think?" So Chapter 2 serves as an effective narrative bridge between the intrigue of the prologue and the unfolding of the novel's core ideas and characters. It shifts tone from suspense to the intellectual and professional world of James Moore, introduces key relationships and tensions, opening a promising doorway to this mystery suspense thriller. James Moore is portrayed as intelligent, composed, and increasingly assertive. His professionalism is balanced with a dry wit, as shown in the final line, an excellent moment of character clarity. Paul Barnes is a solid supporting character, affable, slightly cautious, and believable as the long-time colleague. His role helps humanize James and show how others navigate the politics and public pressures of the university environment. Peter Menzies is a successful antagonist without being a villain. He represents external scrutiny, institutional bias, and superficial media. His presence introduces stakes without overt danger, making him a useful foil. The dialogue is sharp and effective, especially in the second and third parts. The interplay between James and Menzies gradually escalates, maintaining reader engagement. Subtext is handled well here. Paul's veiled warnings, James's reserved contempt, and Menzies' his performative curiosity each suggest that more is going on here beneath the surface. The technology introduced is speculative but plausible. It blends neuroscience and computer engineering in a way that's intriguing without being too difficult for the audience. The video demonstration provides a very natural way to incorporate exposition using visuals and progression to avoid overwhelming the reader. The chapter begins with academic bustle, shifts to an interview setting, and ends with a confrontation. So the arc is subtle but complete. Stakes are hinted at but not overplayed. We understand that James and Paul's work is both revolutionary and vulnerable to misunderstanding or exploitation. The tension between science and skepticism, innovation and institutional resistance, and authenticity versus presentation begins to emerge here. The dry humor, satirical jab at the media world gives the chapter personality and emotional color. So I do hope this chapter 2 example has served well as a model, and I do look forward to seeing you on the next video. Otherwise, thank you for joining me, and bye for now.